Imagine this. You're a sailor. Year 1715. Open Atlantic. A sail appears on the horizon. Your captain lifts his spyglass, pauses for a second too long, and you watch the color drain from his face. It's not the flag of any empire. It's black. And here's what no one tells you, what the movies always get wrong. The cannons don't fire first. Silence comes first. A heavy, suffocating silence. Because the pirate knows if you resist, it's going to be brutal. And you know it too. So most crews didn't fight. They gave up everything without a single shot. Fear was the most powerful weapon on the ocean.
Why did the world create pirates? History loves to paint the pirate as a romantic rebel, a free man in a world of chains. But the truth is darker and far more interesting. Pirates weren't born from crime. They were born from abandonment. By the late 17th century, Europe was locked in one war after another. England against Spain, France against just about everyone. And in the middle of it all, the empires did something very practical. They hired pirates. They called them privateers, gave them letters of marque, official documents that basically said, attack enemy ships as long as we get a cut of the profit. State-sponsored piracy. But when the wars ended, these men were thrown away. No pensions, no back pay, nothing. They were experienced sailors, with ships, with weapons, and no future. So what do you think happened?
The most brutal democracy in history. Here's something history books rarely tell you. Pirate ships had constitutions, written documents, clear rules, loot divided by vote, compensation for anyone who lost an arm in battle, limits on the captain's power, who could be removed by the crew at any time. This was the 1700s, decades before the American Revolution, decades before any modern constitution. They called it the Articles, the ship's code, and every man who stepped aboard had to sign it. But don't romanticize it too much, because the same articles that guaranteed equality also defined the punishment for betrayal. Death, decided collectively, carried out in public. Their freedom had teeth.
Blackbeard, the myth he built himself. Edward Teach, known as Blackbeard. He understood something most of his contemporaries didn't. The most important battle isn't physical, it's psychological. So he turned himself into a monster. Before battle, he would tie slow-burning fuses into his beard. Smoke would rise around his face, like something straight out of hell. His eyes red through the haze, his voice cutting through the silence that came before the storm. He rarely needed to fire a single cannon. His reputation arrived first, and his reputation did the work. But here's the detail the myth leaves out. Blackbeard was only an active pirate for 2 years. 2 years. He died in 1718 in an ambush. 5 bullets in his body, 18 stab wounds, and he still didn't go down easily. That tells you a lot about the man, and even more about the world he lived in.
Samuel Bellamy, the pirate who loved too much. Imagine the ocean at night. No moon, just darkness and water. The wind is rising. The waves are getting heavier. A storm is coming. There are stories told by war, stories of strategy, power, empires clashing. And there are stories told by the sea.
stories with no winners. This is one of them. Samuel Bellamy was born poor in England around 1689. He arrived in the American colonies still young. No money, no name, no future. And in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, he fell in love with a woman named Maria Hallett. The problem was simple and brutal. Her father would never accept a man with no fortune, so Bellamy went to find one. He heard about a Spanish shipwreck off the coast of Florida, an entire fleet of galleons lost in 1715, carrying tons of gold and silver, now resting on the ocean floor. Hundreds of men went searching for it. Bellamy was one of them. He found nothing. What he found instead was a pirate captain named Benjamin Hornigold, and a choice. Bellamy chose the sea. He chose the black flag. He chose to stop being the poor man who needed permission to love. What happened over the next 2 years became one of the most extraordinary chapters of that era. Bellamy captured more than 50 ships. He became known as Black Sam, not for cruelty, but for elegance. He wore fine clothes, refused the powdered wig, a symbol of status at the time, and let his hair flow freely, like a challenge to the world.
And when he captured a ship and the crew resisted, he would speak, a real speech, documented by survivors. It went something like this. You are a pack of cowardly wretches, bowing to rich men who aren't worth half of you. I am a free prince. I have as much authority to make war on the whole world as any man with 100 ships and 10,000 soldiers. You serve merchants and millionaires. You are slaves. This was 1717. In April of that same year, Bellamy was sailing back to Cape Cod, back to Maria Hallett, with enough wealth to make any father say yes. He never made it. A storm, one of the worst ever recorded on the American coast at the time, struck his ship on the night of April 26, 1717. The Whydah galley sank in less than an hour. Out of 146 men, only 2 survived. Samuel Bellamy was 28 years old. The Whydah was found at the bottom of the ocean in 1984, with the coins, with the weapons, with the fragments of a world that lasted 2 years and ended in a single night. Maria Hallett lived another 40 years in Cape Cod. She never married another man. History doesn't say whether she kept waiting or simply stopped.
Henry Avery, the first to disappear. Every pirate in this story meets an end. Captured, executed, drowned, betrayed. Henry Avery ended differently. Henry Avery simply vanished. He was the first great pirate of the Golden Age, before Blackbeard, before Black Bart, before Bellamy. In 1695, he led the biggest pirate heist the world had ever seen. His target was a ship called Ganj-e-Sawai, in Persian, treasure of the world. It was the largest merchant ship sailing the Indian Ocean, owned by Aurangzeb, the Mughal emperor, the richest man alive at the time. Avery attacked at night. The battle lasted for hours. The Ganj-e-Sawai had 80 cannons, hundreds of soldiers. Avery's ship was smaller, fewer men. It didn't matter. By sunrise, Avery had taken the greatest treasure any pirate had ever captured, estimated between 300,000 and 600,000 pounds in gold, silver, and jewels.
In today's terms, tens of millions of dollars. On board were also members of the imperial family and court women. What happened to them that night was recorded by Avery's own crew. It remains one of the darkest chapters in pirate history. England, the Netherlands, and the Mughal Empire issued the largest manhunt ever declared for a pirate. Henry Avery became the most wanted man in the world. And then, he disappeared. He wasn't captured, didn't sink, wasn't hanged in any port. Some of his crew were caught in America and England, tried, executed, displayed. They claimed Avery escaped to the Bahamas, then to Ireland, then to England. There are rumors he tried to sell stolen jewels and was cheated by English merchants who kept everything and were never punished, because buying from a pirate was illegal, but almost impossible to prove. There are rumors he died poor in a small English town, with no one knowing who he once was. There are rumors he built a pirate utopia on Madagascar and lived the rest of his life as a king. None of it was ever proven. The greatest thief of the 17th century walked into the ocean, and the ocean kept him. And maybe that's how some stories are meant to end. Not with a rope around the neck and a crowd watching, but with a man who learned what every empire knows and never says out loud. The best way to survive power is to disappear before it realizes you're still alive.
What the romance hides. It's time to talk about what the movies don't show. The golden age of piracy was also an age of violence, and there was nothing glorious about it. Captured ships had their crews tortured to reveal where the gold was hidden. Enslaved people freed from slave ships were often enslaved again by the pirates themselves, or used as bargaining currency. The romantic pirate, Jack Sparrow, Long John Silver, is an invention, a 19th century invention, when British writers needed adventure and preferred not to look too closely at reality. The truth was a world without safety nets, without laws that meant anything at sea, where violence was simply currency. Anne Bonny and Mary Read, the ones history chose to forget. In 1720, a pirate ship was captured near Jamaica. When soldiers boarded, they found most of the crew drunk, unable to fight. 2 people resisted until the very end. 2. They were women. Anne Bonny and Mary Read sailed as pirates. They knew how to handle sword and pistol, and while the men hid below deck with rum, they stood and fought. At trial, the entire crew was sentenced to death. The men were hanged. Anne and Mary were not, because both were pregnant. Mary died in prison of fever before giving birth. Anne Bonny? She vanished from the historical record. No one knows what happened to her. History didn't think it was worth writing down. Ending. The end the empire needed. By 1720, the British Empire decided the party was over, not because pirates had become more violent, but because Atlantic trade had grown too valuable to tolerate disruption. Gold, sugar, tobacco, all of it needed to move without interruption. The pirate, once a useful tool, had become a logistical problem. So the hunts began. Mass trials, public executions, and the darkest detail of all. Pirates' bodies were hung in iron cages at the entrances of ports, sometimes for months, so every sailor arriving or leaving would know exactly what happened to those who challenged the system. The golden age of piracy didn't fade away. It was executed.
And here's the question I want you to carry with you. Who was the real criminal? The man the state trained to kill, used when it was convenient, and discarded when he was no longer needed, or the state itself?